We're now going to talk about naming conventions. Now, being a technical director and a technical artist, naming conventions are vital because they allow me to break things up to be automated. So in this class, I'm going to be very picky with your naming conventions. So how we're choosing a naming convention? Well, first thing is we're going to have an orientation. Now, this is typically your left, your right, and your center. Everything is going to be broken into one of these three categories. The problem is that these words all have different amount of characters and they're big. So instead of using left, right, and center, we're going to use something much simpler, LT, RT, and CT. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with using caps in this case, like this, or using like a capital first letter, like that. Those are all fine, but what you absolutely cannot do is the mix and match. Because to me, that is three separate things. So that I'm very picky about. That I'm looking for on there. This I'd have to code for three different things for each one of these. So now I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to use the lowercase ones because uppercase in programming means something a little different. Then we have a name. And this is which system we're going to be working off of here. For instance, like back, neck, head. And then we have like leg, clav for clavicle, arm, hand, and so forth. You know, different things like that. Then we're going to have a count. Now, typically you think, oh, like with the arm, you can do like shoulder, elbow, and wrist, and you can do that, but those again are very complicated words. And, you know, your arm is just going to have three joints in our system. Your second joint's always going to be your elbow. Your leg is a very similar system to that, but your second joint's going to be a knee. So I rather use a numbering system on here, like 1, 2, 3, and so forth. This way I can mathematically go through things and I don't have to worry about what the next name of something is. And then finally we have a suffix, and this is what system it is. So in the case of joints, it's going to be bind, which means that this is going to be connected. This joint will be connected to geometry. Then we'll have waste, which means it'll be the end. It could be waste or trash. Both of those are fine. Waste will be the end. Something that pretty much is not connected to geometry. I almost said at the end of our joint chain. It's not always at the end of our joint chain. It's just a joint that is not connected to anything, and it pretty much is just a placeholder there. And then finally we have pivot. Now this one's a little weird. We don't use this too often. This is something that is not connected to geometry, but is still actually going to be controlled and moved around on here. As another side point, like controls, these are actually our joints. These are our joints suffixes. Our controls are going to be icon. And then finally, our geometry is just going to be like geo, like that. Okay, so those are a couple naming conventions. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring all these together using underscores. So for instance, if it's my back, I can say center underscore back underscore 01 bind. That's the first back joint that's going to be bound. Oh, I did forget one other area. When I'm also doing joints, you're also going to see pad as well. For instance, we get CT back, and let's like the last joint, and the last joint is actually waist. Now, it's very important that I use underscores here and not spaces or any other type of characters, because I can search for these and it allows me to subdivide. Also, you might say, well, you're not going to have multiple backs. And the reason why I keep center is that I keep always 4 blocks in our naming convention: orientation, naming, count, and suffix. And I don't have to predict, hey, is this system only have 3 or does it have 4? It makes the coding, it makes the automation of our system much faster. So like if I was doing our left leg, 01 bind, and so forth, or our right clav, 02 waist, which would be like the last joint. Those are kind of examples on here. And you can see over here, I have the finished version of the character, and you can see all the kind of naming conventions where you have pads and those. Now, I might not be at these points at this I've covered all these different areas by the point of this podcast, but I wanted to give you an overview of how what good naming convention looks like. There's all consistency. They're all the same type of structure, and I can very easily see that. So as we get on, it allows me just to do a lot more work as it goes through. There's some icons, and here's a body geo for our geometry. Okay, so that's pretty much the naming conventions we're going to follow. As I'm going along and I'm laying out joints or putting out controls, I normally will do the naming conventions, but I wanted one place where you can look at and you can hear me talk about it.